You know, there's a plan that's been decades in the making to transform American society from the top down. It's not a political party, and it's not your typical lobbying group. It's a Christian movement with a mandate to conquer what they call the 7 mountains of culture: government, media, education, and a bunch of others that we'll get into as we go along here. But the question is this an effort to improve the country? Or is it a calculated plot to dismantle the Constitution and take over the United States? I've been investigating 7 Mountains Mandate for a little while, and I've been asking that same question during the investigation. And I think that what I've turned up here is kind of different. I hope you stick around with me while I explain it, and hopefully you'll find it interesting. Now, you've probably heard the term Christian nationalism. I think we all have. It's been in the news. I've even done an episode on it. There will be links down below. But what you might not know about it is that it's one of its most organized strategies is called the 7 Mountains Mandate, or 7MM. It's an ideology that calls on a specific set of Christians to gain influence, or as they put it, take dominion. No bullshit. Take dominion over the 7 most powerful spheres of culture. Right? The list of these 7 spheres are very specific. It's religion, family, education, government, media, arts and entertainment, and business. The core belief is that if you can control these cultural peaks, that you can reshape the entire nation. Kind of similar to how Gramsci and the cultural Marxists in their long march through the institutions. The same ideology, only it's on the opposite end of the pole, okay? This idea traces back to a meeting that was had between 2 guys in 1975. These guys were evangelical leaders, right? One is Loren Cunningham. He founded the Youth with a Mission organization, and Bill Bright, founder of Campus Crusade for Christ, right? They claim to have shared the very same vision, a vision given to them by God, right? And they saw these 7 spheres as a roadmap for cultural transformation. But that changed in the 21st century, right? After 2000, the concept became kind of supercharged. Figures in the new Apostolic Reformation, like the late Peter Wagner and speaker Lance Wallnau, they rebranded it into a far more aggressive and politically charged mission, right? They framed it as spiritual warfare. They took that on as their branding, and that would grab the attention of spiritual seekers in the 21st century, especially in the New Age era, right? In this view, the 7 mountains are currently controlled by secular or even demonic forces, and that the duty of believers is to wage a war, a cultural war, and a political battle to reclaim them for God. The New Apostolic Reformation, which we'll be referring to as NAR, is a religious movement that emphasizes experience over Scripture, mysticism over doctrine, and modern-day apostles over the plain text written word of the Bible. Of particular distinction in the NAR are the role and power of spiritual leaders and miracle workers, and the reception of what they call new revelations from God, right? With an overemphasis on spiritual warfare and a pursuit of cultural and political control in society. Their ultimate goal, according to their adherents and former members of the organization, is to establish God's kingdom here on earth, not just by spreading the message of God, but by actually taking control. They actually believe it is their heavenly duty to make the world ready for the second coming of Christ, not to prepare for it, but to force it by taking control. So how does a spiritual concept become a political force? Well, let's start with the mountain of government. See, proponents of this 7 Mountains Mandate, they're not just aiming for a seat at the table. They're aiming for the top seat at the table, right? And they want to rebuild the table itself. Their goal is to establish a republic that is run by Christian leaders who enforce their interpretation of biblical law. That vision is openly hostile towards any idea of a society with different beliefs or values, right? If you don't believe me, just check the comment section of this video within a day or 2 of its release, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I am absolutely certain I'm going to be hated on this video everything that I've uncovered here. But this is where religious belief and political strategy have become completely intertwined, okay? This movement is deeply embedded in American politics already, particularly through its support of Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump is seen by some seven mandates leaders as a divinely appointed figure to help them achieve their goals. But it wasn't just Donald Trump. And to bring Donald Trump to them, they needed to get new blood into the NAR. They needed to bring in new people. They needed to bring in influential people, young influential people. Enter Charlie Kirk in Turning Point USA. As most of you know, Charlie was a young political hotshot with a lot of charisma and the ability to be a kingmaker, right? His conservative political ideals, they kind of fairly sort of aligned with the Seven Mountains Mandate and the NAR's ideas. But at the time, TPUSA was a secular organization, right? They were focused only on politics, and they hadn't brought religion or faith into the mix yet at this particular point. So the NAR, they needed a way to convince Charlie to join their cause, right? Now, meanwhile, the NAR influence had reached someone named Pastor Rob McCoy, right? And Pastor Rob McCoy, they reached him through a shared events, platforms, mutual allies in the NAR network, those kinds of things. Now, if you followed any of what Candace Owens has been talking about and what she's laid out there, then you know all about Pastor Rob McCoy, and I don't need to go into him a whole lot further, right? Well, Pastor McCoy, he became a key figure in Charlie's life around 2019, and he convinced Charlie to start framing his political activism in biblical terms. And together they co-founded Turning Point Faith, right, in 2021, I think it was. And their mission was to mobilize churches and pastors, and he tempted Charlie with the idea of using the evangelical vote to bring home his conservative ideas through Trump. And as a result, Charlie Kirk and TPUSA began to increasingly echo Seven Mountain Mandate ideas, hosting Lance Wallnau, who is the speaker of them, promoting cultural dominion, and in treating political wins as part of their reclamation of God's kingdom. And as we know, Trump won the election largely due to the efforts of Charlie Kirk and the Gen Z vote and the evangelical vote that Charlie brought with him. And see, this kind of shows how NAR's theology flowed through Pastor Rob McCoy into major conservative political operations, blending faith and politics together in ways that the Constitution never actually intended. So people tend to associate Charlie Kirk with Christianity, but that was actually never the case until Charlie crossed paths with McCoy, right, and the NAR. Charlie's mission was never the same after that happened. And I'll let Candace take that whole thing from there because that's her arena, and I don't want to dive into that conspiracy. For you and me, this video today, we're just talking about the framework that raises a critical question. Where does religious expression cross the line into coordinated campaign for political power? And see, as I started investigating this Seven Mountains Mandate deeper, it quickly led me to a kind of a dark place, right? And it's not even like I had to search very hard either. The stuff that I found is right on the surface. It's right out there for anybody to be able to find it. And it's pretty unbelievable. I'm kind of still struggling with believing it myself. But, I've done this research here and it's just weird, okay? So let me ask you, if you were going to claim dominion, I really don't like that. If you were going to claim dominion over the U.S. through religious ideology, would it make sense to have an army? An army that's actually capable of enforcing dominion? Well, the ties between the NAR and the military-industrial complex are notably close, right? Often manifesting through shared personnel, events, ideological alignments, and historical collaborations, okay? The military-industrial complex, I'm just going to refer to it as MIC, right? The MIC encompasses the U.S. military, its defense contractors, intelligence agencies, the FBI, CIA, right? Political influencers all over that sustain and help with defense and spending and operations of, United States defense. Now, based on the available sources, right, the connections between the NAR and the MIC are usually within 1 to 2 degrees of separation, right? Typically through high-profile individuals who bridge religious, military, and political spheres together. I'm going to outline some key examples for you here. So first up on the list is Lieutenant General Brian Eifler, right? He's a current 3-star general and deputy chief of staff of personnel. Eifler represented in full uniform at a major NAR event in August of 2024, hosted by NAR apostle Cindy Jacobs. Does that name sound familiar? As part of the Reformation Prayer Network. The presentation actually included a map of the Asia Pacific region and was attended by NAR prophets and apostles. We'll get into that a little bit later, and kingdom warriors. Now, Eifler's wife, Sherry Eifler, right, is a member of the NAR's Alaska War Council, and she's publicly declared that the military is, quote, God's righteous religious warriors aligned with angelic forces. So this prompted an Inspector General investigation into violations of the DoD regulations on uniform use and religious endorsements, right? You're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to wear the uniform while you're doing those types of endorsements for religious purposes and those kinds of things. That's against the Uniform Code of Military Justice. The military is supposed to be a secular organization that is open to anybody of any faith, right? Then you have General Michael Flynn. He's a former U.S. Army Lieutenant General, right? That's another 3-star. He's retired, and he was Trump's national security advisor during the first administration, right? He has deep military intelligence connections, and with his roots as the ex-director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, right? Now, he's hosted NAR leaders such as Lance Wallnau on his Reawaken America tour, right? Promoting NAR themes and spiritual warfare and Christian nationalism, right? Flynn's involvement here shows a pretty distinct line, first 1 degree of separation between the NAR and the MIC. And then, of course, you have Elon Musk, right? Now, Musk spoke at the Life Center, an NAR-affiliated church in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania in 2024. And SpaceX holds billions in MIC contracts for satellite launches, missile defenses, Starlink supports, those kinds of things like that, right? Musk is a heavy player in the military-industrial complex. I mean, we have to admit that, right? His appearance aligns with NAR 7 Mountains mandates as far as the business sphere and the government spheres are concerned. So Elon has an influence in 2 different mountains here. Okay. Now, within 2 degrees of separation, right, these are connections that link the NAR through political or historical figures to broader MIC elements, right? So Donald Trump, right, NAR apostles close to him, right, Paula White Cain, Dutch Sheets, Cindy Jacobs, they all advised Trump during his first presidency, including strategy meetings before the 2006 or, the January 6th, what they call an insurrection. Trump as commander-in-chief oversaw massive MIC expansions, including record defense budget spending that benefited contractors like Lockheed Martin and Raytheon. And that happened during his first term, and he still has those same types of people, particularly Paula Cain, who's influencing him still today. Then you have Matt Shea. He's a former U.S. Army officer, Washington representative, right? He embodies the NAR style of independent, charismatic leadership that blended with the far right militia ideologies. Okay, he has ties to NAR networks through events and rhetoric promoting dominionism, right, and real-world combat. Now, let me say that again. He has ties to the NAR networks through events, and he uses rhetoric promoting dominionism and real-world combat. Dominionism and real-world combat. Within 3 degrees of separation, right, You have other figures out there. Now at 3 degrees, it starts to spread out a little bit. These guys just have extended ties through political influencers, and they have ideological overlaps, right? Most of it's still traceable, but one in particular stands out here to me that is kind of crazy, okay? Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, right? Johnson's worked with the NAR apostles and displayed the appeal to heaven, which is the NAR flag, right outside of his office door. Right, as a congressional leader, he influences defense appropriations that fund the MIC. And Johnson, now, this is weird to think about here, okay? But Johnson, as Speaker of the House, is third in line to the presidency of the United States. Let that sink in a minute. That's how close they are to the top. While Trump himself is not a Christian nationalist, you have one sitting third in line. Then there's ties to other things too. Pentecostal evangelical military pipeline, right? It's just basically full of people who are evangelicals who have also had ties or spent time in high levels of the military, right? So it's not a monolithic alliance, okay? But there's enough proximity here to raise concerns about Christian nationalism infiltrating military decision-making, right? And there's ongoing investigations and critiques from groups like the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, and those guys are taking a look into all of this kind of stuff. And so it's still being investigated. And as I was digging in and taking a look at this kind of stuff, man, it's strange to think about how a group of Christians are set to militarily take over and impose dominion. It's crazy, okay? And I'm not just making this shit up. It is crazy. So all this leads to a constitutional question, right? Is the Seven Mountains Mandate a constitutional takeover? Well, critics, including legal experts, scholars, they all argue that the movement's entire premise is a direct challenge to the Constitution. Specifically, they point to First Amendment's Establishment Clause, which says that Congress can make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Okay, for over 2 centuries, this has been understood as a separation of church and state. We've done a ton of videos on this. I'm just going to attach the playlist link down below. Okay, the Seven Mountain Mandate ideology, with its goal of placing all major societal institutions under the control of one interpretation of Christianity, appears to stand in direct opposition to the First Amendment. Okay, the NAR sees democracy as failing. They don't use the word, but they want a theocracy. They see the Constitution as antiquated, and they want the Bible to be the governing document under their interpretation of the Bible. Under their interpretation of the Bible, of course. There's a scholar named Matthew Bodie, right? He wrote a book called The Seven Mountains Mandate, exposing the dangerous plan to Christianize America and destroy democracy. That is a mouthful title, but that's the name of it, right? He argues that the movement is a dangerous strategy to do exactly that, to militarize and take over America. He and others note that its goals would violate the landmark of Supreme Court rulings, cases like Epperson versus Arkansas and Lemon versus Kurtzman. Now, both of those cases they deal with education and the First Amendment, right? The political theory of Seven Mountains Mandate, though, is openly hostile to a pluralistic democracy, right? As we've seen, the goal here isn't to win a debate of ideas, but to achieve dominion. It's a vision where one group's interpretation of biblical law holds authority over all other citizens. And critics warn that it would create an authoritarian state rooted in Christian nationalist values, calling for the purging of federal agencies of nonpartisan staff and replacing all of them with politically vetted allies to enforce a narrow set of moral beliefs, right? So basically they want to get all their own people in there. So let's be clear on this, okay? The Seven Mountains Mandate is not a vague conspiracy theory. It's a very real, totally real, well-funded, influential ideology of societal transformation, okay? A January 2024 analysis found that 41% of self-identified American Christians agreed with the core tenet that God wants Christians to stand atop the seven mountain society. While proponents frame their efforts as a spiritual renewal to save the country, the evidence suggests that there's a clear ambition to systematically dismantle the wall of separation between church and state. It has an agenda that sees pluralism not as a strength, but as a problem to be solved. Ultimately, whether this amounts to a constitutional takeover isn't a question with a simple yes or no answer, right? It's a conclusion that needs to be drawn from evidence, and evidence shows that a movement actively working to reshape every major institution in American life according to a single religious worldview is actually happening, right? It's now up to an informed public, right, to debate and decide what that means for the future of this republic. Now, this is kind of creepy. This whole thing is kind of creepy, and when you dig in, it's kind of dark, especially the NAR and this whole Seven Mountains mandate and what's going on with the government, the MIC, all of that kind of stuff. I didn't dig as deep as I actually could have. If you want me to do that, if you've stuck around this far in the video and you want me to do that, leave it down in the comments below, and I'll dig into it. But it gets pretty deep and pretty creepy real quick, right? And so I just wanted to let you know kind of what's happening here, because of there's definitely what people call a spiritual war going on, but it's not created by demons and angels. It's happening right here, right now, with people of certain ideologies. And I'm not sure where I stand on that anymore, particularly after this investigation. So anyway, if you found any of this valuable, share it, hit like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. I appreciate each and every one of you who stick around to the end of these videos, or who even start to watch them in the first place. It's incredibly important. For a small channel like me, and I just want to let you know that I'm grateful to you all and I appreciate you all. Anyway, thanks for listening to me today.